Hey kids, Dad here. You ever find yourself stuck on a game because you're not entirely sure if it's a bad game or if you just suck at it? And to make matters worse, you keep playing that game because you're convinced that if you just tough it out, you'll eventually get good at it and everything will click into place? No, I'm not talking about Dark Souls, kids. I'm talking about Quake Champions. Quake Champions is a game, I guess. Announced back in 2016 at E3, Champions was developed by id Software and co-developed by Saber Interactive. Playable as an open beta through the Bethesda launcher in April 2017, Champions entered Steam Early Access in August that same year for a whopping price point of $30 before going free to play a year later in 2018. I bet players were pissed at that choice. At least the $30 got you all of the champions to play with it. The free-to-play model only gave players access to 2 champions, Ranger and Scalebearer, and if you wanted more, you'd have to either play the game to unlock them, or pay real money to have them right away. That's right, kiddos, we've got an id Software game with microtransactions and in-game currency. If you thought Doom Eternal re-releasing free cosmetic packs that you could pay for was bad, wait till you hear about this bullshit. Originally developed under the codename Lovecraft, Champions' origins go all the way back to 2013, where the game was going to be an expansion to Quake Live, which is a completely different bone that I have to pick. But as time went on, the project took new life, and when it was decided that it wouldn't be connected to Quake Live at all, Saber Interactive was brought on to work on the game. id and Saber came up with a hybrid game engine using id Tech and Sabertech to kind of mix-mash something together that was neither completely one studio's or another's. At this point in time, there's still no name for the hybrid engine, but as Alien Resurrection taught us, all hybrids are evil, and the sooner we shoot them out into space, the better. So Champions entered Early Access in 2017 and never left. With 4.5 years of Early Access and 13 seasons of evolution, patches, and battle passes, how does Quake Champions stack up in the long-running series of Quake games that we all know and love? Well, I've been playing them all one after the other, and you kids seem entertained by it so far, so pull up a chair and let's talk about disappointment. Champions is an online-only hero shooter, a term originally coined by Gearbox's Battleborn. Shit, no. Oh, sorry, kids. That's a different episode that I'll. Fucking Battleborn. Hero shooter is a term originally coined by Gearbox's Battleborn, which released almost exactly around the same time as Overwatch, a game you're probably far more familiar with, and which actually set the standard for the hero shooter genre. By now, you ought to know what I'm talking about. You have a series of different characters, all with different abilities, designs, strengths, and weaknesses, some of which fall into a specific class like in Team Fortress 2. You pick your character based on your preferred style of gameplay, drop into team-based matches, and have objectives to complete utilizing the strengths of your characters to balance out the weaknesses and win the day. Each hero is also going to have different options for customizing their appearance to help individual players feel like their character is unique to them. It's a fun and popular take on the online shooter genre, but if you're someone like me, it's a little rocky a concept because you'll have characters who are aesthetically pleasing, but whose gameplay isn't in line with your comfort zone. So maybe you'll try and tough it out and play as McCree. Hang on. Sorry, I forgot they changed his name to Cole Cassidy because the Blizzard staffer that the character was originally named after, Jesse McCree, contributed to a toxic work environment and is a general piece of shit. So maybe you'll try and tough it out and play as Cole Cassidy, but your personal gameplay style is maybe more suited to Soldier 76. But that sucks because you like the cowboy man, and the sad murder dad soldier dude is a trope done to death and you'd rather not contribute to that anymore. But you yourself are a sad murder dad. It's me, actually. We're talking, we're talking about me here. It's actually me. You yourself are a sad murder dad, so that's who you play as because that's your skill set comfort zone. Now, on one hand, sure, I get it. The hero shooter concept is like taking a fighting game and making it a first-person shooter. You got different characters with different move sets that complement a variety of playstyles, but online shooters where you can't just pick a skin and roll into combat irk me because I'm not really a fan of trying to strategize on the fly based on my individual character class during intense situations. So don't expect me to start doing Twitch streams of esports, Call of Duty, Killzone, Battle Royale with cheese nonsense anytime soon. Old school, boomer shooter multiplayer, where you pick a skin and drop into the arena with a dozen or so other yahoos all on the same level with the same guns is where it's at for me. So when Champions debuted its hero system, I was, skeptical, to say the least. And on one hand, I find myself validated in that skepticism because Quake Champions falls squarely into that love it or hate it hero shooter set of mechanics as each of the 16 champions you can pick from all have unique powers and passive abilities that make playing them in-game either a smooth sailing experience or a chore and a half. Look, I'll be straight up. Part of my disinterest and aggravation with this game is that I just do not fucking care for the hero class system of some online shooters, and normally that would be fine. That's just fine, because I can stay away from those games knowing that there are plenty of gamers who do enjoy them, and I can stick to the games that I enjoy, and I don't need to talk shit about it, and we can all play games that we all enjoy forever and ever, amen. Except, here in the case of a series that I am a complete slut for, hero shooter mechanics have wormed their way into my boomer shooter, and I am stuck with the notion that a style I personally loathe is now the only option for the latest and, somewhat, greatest entry in the Quake series. It's just not a good fit for the Quake series. And yet there are hundreds of players online at any given point in time who refute that answer simply by existing and playing the game. Although I feel that the people playing this game in the year of our Lord, John Romero 2022, are not the same player base who latched onto the original Quake trilogy back in the day. The way it works is thus. Each of these champions have abilities you can activate during combat, some of them for more quick escapes, and some of them more for doing brutal amounts of damage. They also each have their passive abilities, which range from being able to gain speed by bunny hopping to being immune to fire damage to regenerating health. And Jesus Christ, again, this just doesn't feel like the right fit for a Quake experience. Quake Deathmatch has always been about dropping in and grabbing a rocket launcher and going to town, not picking a character based on their abilities and gameplay style. This especially becomes more evident when you have teams that are completely imbalanced because the auto-matching system will drop 3 Death Knights onto one team, which means this team can now drop wide swaths of flame walls which do damage over time and cover a large area of effect. Death Knight also has the ability to set people on fire if they hit with a melee attack. I played against one dude who never even used ranged weapons. He just ran around and tagged people with melee attacks and then bounced away and let the damage over time do the rest. Imbalanced teams are one of the biggest problems this game has, due in part to stacking multiple players with the same champion chosen onto one team, but also stacking multiple super pro players onto a team while stacking a bunch of noobs onto the other. The inability to pick which server you want to join or who to play with is absurdly aggravating. I had a few times while playing where I was very clearly the best player on my team, which was trouble because I fucking suck at this game. Which, you know what? I'm a fairly good first-person shooter gamer. I'm not going to toot my own horn too much and say I'm really good. I'm not, but I can hold my own in a rocket duel. I don't often come in first place, nor do I usually crack the top 3, but I'm good enough that I have fun while doing so. Yet I cannot fucking play this game well to save my fucking life. Literally in some cases. But we'll come back to that because fuck. Players can use these champions to absolutely cheese some rounds. Like with BJ Blazkowicz, whose dual wield ability is fucking broken. Or Death Knight's aforementioned Flame Wall. Or Sorlag's Acid Spit. Meanwhile, characters like Galena, who have a healing totem they can drop, are mostly useless because it's a fucking motionless healing item that you have to stand next to in order to take advantage of it. And if you stand still in this game, you're fucking dead faster than I can read this sentence. It's also fucking useless because even if it is healing you, it doesn't heal you fast enough to do any goddamn good. It doubles as a trap against enemy players in that the same totem does damage against enemies, but let's be honest here, it doesn't do enough damage quick enough to be useful, even as a trap next to a portal, because players will be moving quickly out of the path of damage regardless. Nyx can turn herself invisible for a moment. Sorry. Phase shift. So she can get out of combat for a 30-second interval and then try to sneak up on someone, but you can't shoot while invisible, so, you know, I guess that's fucking useful. Hero shooter mechanics just don't work with a Quake game. Either you are introducing a new batch of gamers to a system that doesn't exist in prior Quake games, thus setting them up for disappointment if they go backwards to explore the series prior, or you're disappointing the older gamers who have stuck with the franchise from the first game onwards, setting them up with a system that isn't the same as what we've experienced in the past and now relies on the mechanics of other popular shooter games in order to maintain a semblance of popularity on a modern shooter landscape. And while I understand that one of the key core mechanics of the Quake series is that Quake constantly reinvents itself with each new installment, this is such a wildly different take compared to the previous games that it doesn't even feel like a Quake game at all. Fucking Quake 4 feels more like a Quake game than this does, and after my lengthy review on that game, you can imagine how I must feel about this shit. Attempting to make a video on this without devolving into vitriolic ranting is a nigh impossible task here, kids, because most of this experience feels like pissing on the graves of the games that came before. At the time of Champions' release, Quake had been essentially a dead IP, with Quake 4 being released nearly 10 years before it in 2005, and Quake Live had been released in 2010 as a game you had to play in your web browser. Yeah, that's right, kids. Quake Live was originally a web browser extension. Imagine that, having to play Quake multiplayer through Internet Explorer. What a fucking... Should I be talking about Quake Live instead of this? Should I? No. Focus. Focus, goddammit. There are aspects of this game that I like. The hybrid game engine, odd as it sounds, is pretty enough and has some interesting effects and lighting and detail that even 4.5 years onwards are pretty impressive. Being able to earn or purchase different skins for weapons to customize them beyond just colors and shaders is nice. I'm not ashamed to admit I spent money to unlock the classic Quake weapons pack so I can run around carrying the OG double barrel and lightning gun. Andrew Hulsholt and Chris Vrenna, two industry icons, worked on the dynamic score together, which, let's face it, Hulsholt's work slaps constantly, and Vrenna's contributions are also solid. His music is kinda hit or miss for me overall, but this stuff is pretty good. I really like it. Except when I said the score is dynamic, it means it shifts back and forth between adrenaline pumping and depressing, depending on how well you are playing. If you or your team are in the lead and doing well, the music ramps up, turns to rocking metal and high BPM goodness that keep the momentum flowing as you're fragging. But if you lose that lead, the music will downshift into something quieter, gentler, reminding you that you're not doing as well as you could be doing this round, and it gets really disheartening to hear that. Like, dude, I just want some good-ass heavy metal frag music to keep me motivated to try harder, but if you slow that shit down, my interest also slows down too. And that's not the fault of the composers, that's the fault of the design of the game. Hulsholt and Vrenna delivered a competent score that honestly lives rent-free in my head lately. It's not as iconic as, say, 9 Inch Nails or Sonic Mayhem's work on the trilogy, but it's good stuff. And while the graphical quality of the game is pretty neat, I can't say that I care for how bright and colorful and exaggerated the design work is. All of the characters have cartoonish animations, some of them have unforgivably bland design, and I don't even know how to express how distractingly weird it is to see Quake characters running around with goofy cosmetics like Santa hats or bunny ears or a purple chrome Doomslayer. And yes, I know there are joke character skins in previous Quake games also, like this fucking weird-ass clown thing, but those skins felt like they were put there for the trolls or people who just wanted to have fun. Not every single design felt cartoonish. The weapons are so fucking terribly designed that I cannot even begin with it. First off, all of them feel insipidly underpowered. The shotgun is whack as fuck. If you can't make a good double-barreled shotgun in a Quake game, you have fucked up. The lightning gun. My god. The lightning gun sounds like I'm pissing upstream and does about as much damage. Whatever happened to the deep booming thundercrack from using the lightning gun like in Quake 1 or 3? Resonant, pulsating bass followed by a continuous bolt of electricity that tore through enemies like COVID through a red state. Now it looks and sounds like a long-range taser that has the same effect as common decency in a red state. And the nail gun... Look at this thing. Just look at it. How intimidating is that? Is it intimidating? Is it at all? Let's start with how other nail guns in Quake games look. Okay. Now how do they sound? Okay. Now how does this one look? Okay. And how does it sound?
Lead lost. Teams are tied. Lead lost.
Look how they massacred my boy.
None of these weapons feel good to use. None of the projectiles fire fast enough, the splash damage doesn't splash enough, and yet! Somehow these weapons seem incredibly powerful and efficient when they're being used on me. Now, I thought I was doing something really wrong, kids. I really did, but I went and read a few reviews of different builds over the last 4 years just to get impressions of how far this game has come along. And I read more than a few perspectives about how using the weapons feels like handling a wet fart, but being attacked with those same weapons feels like being dismantled from the inside out with a shovel. What a strange dichotomy that is, but it also proves that it's not just me. Part of this, I imagine, has to do with the player base. Some of the encounters I've had are with people who've been playing this game since it first came out, and also with some who clearly didn't know what they were getting into when they downloaded this free-to-play game, but it is remarkably evident who has been here for a while and who has not. And the gamers who have been here for a while, my god, my hat goes off to you youngins, because Jesus, Dick, you have put me in my place so many times playing a mediocre hero shooter that doesn't know who it is catering to, and by mastering that mediocrity and making it an art, you have surpassed all known expectations and redefined what it means to be an FPS gamer. That said, the steep learning curve for new players walking into a game that has such a seasoned player base is incredibly disheartening. I've got over 35 hours logged into this game. Most of that logged in since June because of the Quake 25th anniversary, and I still don't fucking know what I'm doing or how to enjoy this game. Oh, certainly, sometimes there are moments of near glory that stimulate the frontal lobes enough to keep playing, thinking that there's some good shit right around the corner and a good match to be had, but then the worm turns and it's back to getting juiced. I have spent so much time trying to figure out if it's me that sucks or if it's the game that I'm playing that sucks, and I just legit don't have an answer. I have tried everything that I can think of. I have adjusted my mouse settings so many times, lowering sensitivity, raising sensitivity, using raw mouse input, using DirectX mouse input. I tried changing the crosshair, changing the scale of the crosshair to see if that could help my aim. I even set my HUD to carry weapons in the center of the screen instead of to the right to see if I could channel classic Quake and improve aim and skills. Nothing seems to work. Do I just suck at this? Is that it? I know I'm not great against human players, and I factored that in, but holy toast in the shape of John Carmack, I just don't understand how I'm so bad at this game. And the further I play, the more I sink into that depressive state, questioning whether or not I ought to be even playing FPS games in the first place. Do I even have the right to be making commentary on this? Like, Jesus, on any first-person shooter? Maybe I'm putting on airs. Maybe I'm fooling myself into believing that I know how to play these types of games, that I know what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm approaching this from the wrong angle. Maybe I need to look into the history of the game a little bit more, have some care and understanding, and now, here's the thing, kids. I'm not really the biggest fan of Tom Willits. There's a number of reasons. First off, he made the single worst map in Quake 3 in under an hour and bragged about it like that's a goddamn Xbox Live achievement or something. Second of all, he made the claim that he created the concept of maps that existed specifically for deathmatch, a claim that was refuted by John Romero on the World Wide Web for everyone to see, and Romero was backed not only by John Carmack, but by Tom Hall as well. Willits also laid claim to the notion that he created all of the levels for the shareware version of Quake, which was again disputed by John Romero, and led to American McGee referring to Willits as a serial credit thief. And furthermore, Willits, allegedly, intentionally gave American McGee bad advice during development of Quake 2, which allegedly led to McGee being let go from id Software because John Carmack was pissed about his work, which has led to the heavy speculation that Willits is the unnamed snake in the grass that Sandy Peterson has referred to multiple times in his recollection of early days at id Software. Tom Willits has a history of mediocre work, neither good nor truly bad, just mediocre, standing on the shoulders of giants to reach the tops of mountains he couldn't dream of climbing on his own. Also, he could hop from platform to platform into a position of directing some of id Software's most mediocre releases. It then comes as no surprise to me why Quake Champions feels so soulless, knowing that Willits was the man in the director's chair. I started out angry writing this script, trying to encapsulate my feelings towards this game, a game that I can't stop playing, but I don't like playing, but I somehow justify all of it because simply the game is a Quake game, a part of a series that I want to support in order to hopefully see another release in the series at some point. And not only a new release, but one with a single-player campaign. After all, Quake Deathmatch is mostly good shit, but the single-player stuff absolutely slaps. I would love to see a new campaign that draws from the eldritch portions of Quake 1, maybe even mix in a little of the cosmic atmosphere of Quake 3. Find some kind of balance between the two. With two games that deal with the Strogg, we're due for a little bit more Eldritch lore, which makes Champions even more frustrating, because this game actually does try to build some lore around the Elder Gods and monsters that you're fighting for, fighting around, who maintain the areas that you fight in. But story and lore in a game such as this feels about as useful as a limp dick at a porn shoot. What's especially frustrating about this is that you unlock the lore through playing the game, so you can't even read up on things that are going on on in the background of a game like this without playing as different characters and progressing through the seasonal battle passes, which is again great and all, but like, an online game that doesn't have a distinct campaign that you progress through for story purposes shouldn't hide the background lore that you have to unlock by playing online constantly. And not only that, but by playing as different champions, because you can't unlock it all by just playing as the one that you like the most all of the time. I had so much to say about this game. So much that I wanted to articulate that I feel has just deflated with the knowledge that Tom Willits directed this game. I wanted to talk about the control scheme and how it feels like I'm simultaneously always running too fast and too slow at the same time. I wanted to talk about how no matter what I do to adjust the controls, it feels like there is no precision whatsoever, and every good shot I've gotten in against another player was done through sheer random chance. I wanted to talk about how, despite this game being so defeating and frustrating and aggravating, it has hands down the politest player base I've encountered in an online game, and that is frankly pretty goddamn commendable. But all of that feels lost in the wind with the knowledge of Willits and his bland direction pushing Quake down the path of least resistance towards what shooters are currently popular, rather than innovating and creating something new the way that the series had done so far up to this point. Quake Champions just doesn't incite joy or want for more Quake. It doesn't. If anything, the recent remaster of Quake 1 has done more to draw excitement from the well of Quake fans who have been clamoring for another single-player experience. Those of us disappointed by this insipid and frankly boring entry that somehow brings us back over and over to the allure of a potentially good round of Quake. I can't even look at Quake Champions. I can't even play it, and yet I can't stop playing it. I can't. There's something in there that compels me like a morphine addict looking for a hit. Something somehow to try and find a way to prove to myself that I am good at it, that I can be good at it, that it's not my skills here or my pride or my ego. There's just got to be a way that I am actually good at this game and shooters in general. Whatever dark black magic that Tom Willits sold his soul for, it works here. Not because it's good. It's not. And not because it stays true to the spirit of Quake. It doesn't. But simply because it taps into the same vein as a gambling addiction, where you're praying, hoping for one good round of Quake gaming in this strange mishmash of ideas that can't hold a candle to any of the sources of inspiration for it. And yet, it is just successful enough to keep running, to maintain momentum long enough for it to have been in early access for 4 fucking years and may never see the light of a full release, because it combines just enough different dopamine hits to feel like it actually does provide the experience it pretends to provide, just long enough for players to return for more. And why not? It's Quake. It gets played during QuakeCon and on Twitch and at other esports venues. It's Quake. Willits also directed Quake Live, the poor man's version of Quake 3, which, as mentioned before, started life as a browser game before getting a full release via Steam. Willits no doubt saw the writing on the wall and thought, we can get Quake into the grubby little hands of a bunch of new players if we utilize the hero shooter mechanics that Team Fortress 2 established and is being heavily featured in Overwatch, which all the kids all really want already. So when it came time for Champions, originally an expansion to Quake Live, to bear fruit, it was reworked into a standalone hero shooter that does nothing but disappoint while coercing you into the backroom parlor once again, only to tease you with the briefest of ankle flashes. Kids, Quake Champions is not a Quake game. It's a game that weaponizes hero shooters and wears the downloadable cosmetics of a Quake game to make you think it is one. It has pulled the wool over your eyes for far too long, and it's time to pull back the curtain and show the man pulling the strings. This mediocre release doesn't deserve your money, which is saying something because it's free to play. And what makes matters worse is that Tom Willits has worked on every Quake game in some capacity. For most of them, he was a level designer. In the case of Quake 4, he was an executive producer. But Quake Live and Champions, he actually directed the entire production of. I would say that he ought to know better, but I know better than that. Willits utilized his experience with the Quake series as a springboard to his own success, slowly but surely utilizing inspirations from other, better games to craft lesser, mediocre titles that have a flagship banner and sell just enough while not disappointing enough to maintain a system of him failing upwards. Quake Champions is the high watermark in a sequence of games under his direction that prove that concept to be true. And with that, I'm giving Quake Champions a 4 out of 10. I feel like there was so much here to discuss, and yet There really just isn't. There's a game here for people that utilizes hero shooter mechanics, and if you're into that and you like Quake, you might find some enjoyment in this. But the truth is, I doubt it will do anything better than Overwatch or Apex Legends. People have been asking for years if Champions is a dead game. And on one hand, it kind of is, simply because it's only being kept alive by die-hard Quake fans rather than shooter fans at large. On the other hand, if there are this many people still playing it just to play a Quake game, is it really dead? I can't even answer that. I'm still playing it even as I write this last part of the script because I want this game to be good somehow. Somewhere deep in its DNA there must be some quality. But the further I look, the more I'm disappointed. If there is any game series that I hold near and dear and desire to see succeed, it is Quake. But this? If you play Champions, there's a strong chance you'll see my name pop up at some point because I can't stop playing this soulless game, just like an addict, hoping for one last hit that will make everything better. One good round that makes me feel like I finally figured this shit out and beat Willits at his own game. But that moment will never come. I'll just be chasing the dragon, softly crying to myself as I can't figure out how to play any better at a game that is not designed for me. Truth be told though, I'm not sure who it's designed for. So you know what I'm gonna do about it? I'm gonna play another Tom Willits game, and we're gonna examine just how he likes to steal from other sources and make it look like it was his idea all along. Saddle up, kids. This shit is about to get real bumpy.